What if I told you Prince Harry is just one signature away from being erased from royal history permanently? In a chilling new twist from Buckingham Palace, King Charles has already stripped Prince Harry of his HRH title online, but insiders say the next move will change the monarchy forever. The palace is quietly preparing to cut Harry out of the royal line of succession entirely. Why now? What's happening behind the velvet curtains? And how will this affect Meghan and their children? Stay with us, because what you're about to hear is the most decisive royal purge in modern history. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The early morning stillness of London was shattered by a subtle but seismic update on the royal family's official website. At first, it seemed like nothing, a quiet technical change that most would overlook. But within hours, headlines began erupting across the globe. Prince Harry's HRH title had been officially removed from the royal family's digital domain. Not just omitted, not forgotten, deliberately deleted. For many royal watchers, this was the symbolic bullet that had been loading since the explosive Megxit departure. For others, it was a long overdue response to years of controversy, accusations, and what palace loyalists have privately described as betrayal on a global scale. But as Buckingham Palace remained outwardly silent and firm, what insiders whispered behind the velvet curtains of the monarchy was far more chilling. This wasn't the end of the punishment. It was just the beginning. According to palace insiders, removing the HRH was only phase one. The next step, the one King Charles has been quietly preparing in private with legal and constitutional advisors, could permanently sever Prince Harry's link to the throne. This is no longer just about status. It's about legacy, power, and the future architecture of the House of Windsor. But what does it really mean to be kicked out of the line of succession? Can a reigning monarch legally do that? What happens to the titles, privileges, and symbolic power Harry still technically holds as the king's son? These questions now hover like a storm cloud over an already fractured royal family, and the stakes couldn't be higher. To understand the gravity of what is unfolding, we have to go back, not just to 2020 when Harry and Meghan stepped away from their royal duties, but even further, to the psychological and political tension that's quietly shaped the family for decades. While the British monarchy is a centuries-old institution grounded in tradition, it is also a stage for real human conflict, trust versus betrayal, duty versus personal freedom, and lineage versus disruption. When Prince Harry and Meghan Markle chose to carve their own path, the public was split. To some, they were modernizing the monarchy, humanizing it even. To others, they were undermining it from the inside, weaponizing their proximity to the crown for commercial gain and personal influence. But the most powerful figures within Buckingham Palace, including King Charles and his closest circle of advisors, saw something even deeper, a threat to the continuity and credibility of the institution itself. That threat reached boiling point during the Oprah Winfrey interview in 2021. Harry and Meghan's accusations of racism, emotional neglect, and toxic silence sent shockwaves across the Commonwealth. At that moment, the monarchy ceased to be merely a constitutional fixture. It became a contested idea, something that could be publicly challenged, doubted, and debated across continents. But if there is one thing the monarchy does not tolerate, it's internal insurrection. And unlike Queen Elizabeth, who spent most of her reign avoiding confrontation and maintaining unity at all costs, King Charles has shown a very different approach. Insiders describe him as decisive, strategic, and unwilling to let emotion override what he sees as necessary discipline. That brings us to now. By removing the HRH title from the official royal website, King Charles sent a coded message to those who still think of Harry as a spare with lingering influence. The monarchy is closing ranks. The digital deletion is the equivalent of crossing a name out of a sacred scroll, one that, for centuries, defined who could one day wear the crown. But this move also raises a storm of constitutional and emotional complexities. Prince Harry is still, biologically and legally, the son of the reigning monarch. He is also still sixth in line to the throne. Removing him from the line of succession would be unprecedented in modern times. It would require not only legal consultation, but also likely parliamentary cooperation. And yet, sources say that process has already quietly begun. In private meetings that remain off the official royal schedule, advisors to King Charles have reportedly explored the historical and legal pathways to accomplish what once seemed impossible. rewriting the immediate future of the royal family by formally striking Harry from the succession list. It's not a question of anger anymore. It's about control. The monarchy fears that if Harry remains in line, even symbolically, he could one day be used by political or foreign forces to destabilize the royal institution. In an age of global influence, royal symbolism matters just as much as real power. But here's where it gets even more controversial. Some legal scholars argue that no single monarch has the power to unilaterally remove a royal descendant from the line of succession. That authority, they say, lies with Parliament under British constitutional law. If that's the case, it means the king is not just acting out of personal emotion. He may be moving toward a larger political showdown, one that tests the boundaries between the monarchy and the government itself. For Harry, this slow erasure from royal life is no longer about rebellion. It's about exile. Not physical exile. He remains in California with his family, but symbolic exile from a legacy that once defined his entire identity. To be stripped of one's HRH title is one thing. To be told you are no longer even part of the crown's future? That's something else entirely. That's banishment in the oldest and most devastating sense. Yet the public, as always, is split. Many believe Harry deserves this fate, that his tell-all memoir, public criticisms of his family, and high-profile interviews crossed every imaginable line of decorum. Others argue that this is a monarchy clinging to outdated rules, punishing a man for simply speaking his truth. In truth, both sides carry weight. This is not a simple story of hero and villain. It's a deeply personal civil war unfolding under the eyes of the world. The royal family has always dealt with scandal in private, retreating behind the walls of palaces and estates, leaking carefully chosen messages to sympathetic journalists. But Harry broke that contract. He made their fights public, their silences political, and their traditions questionable. In response, Charles is doing something equally unthinkable, reshaping the very architecture of monarchy to make sure this never happens again. What remains to be seen is just how far Charles is willing to go. Removing a title from a web page is one thing. Removing a son from the royal future is another. Yet every whisper from palace corridors points to the same inevitability. The king is preparing to make it official. Harry, once a prince of the realm, will soon be written out of history's royal draft. In the end, this isn't just about family drama. It's about the future of the monarchy. If Charles succeeds, he sets a precedent, one where titles, bloodlines, and legacy can be revised, corrected, and even erased. It's a warning to anyone else in the royal orbit who might consider putting personal freedom above institutional loyalty. As we move deeper into this story, we'll uncover how Charles is preparing this final move, what laws and procedures must be followed, who stands to benefit, and how Meghan Markle and their children are caught in the crossfire. But most importantly, we'll look at the question that now haunts both Windsor Castle and California's coastlines. Can a king truly remove his own blood from the crown's future? And what happens to the soul of a monarchy when it decides to forget its own? This is not just a royal scandal. This is a historic reckoning, and it's happening in real time. The unraveling of Prince Harry's relationship with the monarchy was not sudden. It was a slow-burning fracture that eventually erupted into full-blown detachment. To fully understand why King Charles is now reportedly preparing to remove his own son from the royal line of succession, we must first walk through the turbulent timeline of events that brought us here, a journey marked by rebellion, tension, public conflict, and personal choices that forever altered the image of the British monarchy. It began quietly, as these things often do. In 2016, Prince Harry's relationship with American actress Meghan Markle became public. At first, it seemed like a charming new chapter for the royal family. Meghan was charismatic, successful, and refreshingly different. But as their relationship grew serious, the tone of media coverage shifted. Tabloid scrutiny intensified. Meghan, being biracial, American, and divorced, became a lightning rod for both admiration and criticism. And behind the palace walls, tension reportedly began to simmer, not just about the match itself, but about how fast it was moving. In 2018, the royal wedding was a global spectacle. Meghan entered Windsor Castle with grace and flair, representing a symbol of modern royalty. Yet, even before the vows were exchanged, reports had begun surfacing about arguments over flower girls' dresses, including the infamous fallout with Catherine, the Princess of Wales. Within the tight-lipped royal sphere, These rumors were a signal that harmony was already beginning to crack. The months that followed the wedding were filled with appearances and handshakes, smiles and state visits. But behind the scenes, the storm was gathering. Meghan reportedly struggled with the constraints of royal life, and Harry, always protective of her, grew increasingly frustrated with the institution's inability to defend her against media attacks. By early 2019, whispers of internal strife turned into public speculation. The media began documenting a growing distance between the Sussexes and the Cambridges, calling it a rift between brothers that no one could ignore. Then came the pivotal moment. The release of the ITV documentary Harry and Meghan, An African Journey, in late 2019. For the first time, the public saw the raw emotion in Harry's eyes as he confirmed that he and William were on different paths. Meghan appeared tearful, openly stating that few had asked if she was truly okay. The royal mask had slipped. The illusion of unity shattered. It was now impossible to pretend that all was well behind the scenes. And then came January 2020, the bombshell that became known around the world as Megxit. In a statement that blindsided not just the public, but reportedly even senior royals, Harry and Meghan announced their decision to step back from royal duties. They intended to split their time between the United Kingdom and North America, seek financial independence, and redefine their roles within the royal family. Buckingham Palace was caught off guard. Crisis meetings, codenamed the Sandringham Summit, were convened to contain the fallout. Queen Elizabeth II, in a statement that was both gracious and firm, acknowledged the couple's desire for independence but made it clear that they could not operate in a half-in, half-out capacity. The monarchy, an institution defined by rigid structure and loyalty, could not accommodate royal freelancers. By spring 2020, the Sussexes were no longer working royals. They relocated to California, bought a house in Montecito, signed major deals with Netflix and Spotify, and began crafting their image as public figures separate from the monarchy. The world watched as they transformed from royal family members to celebrity advocates, blending humanitarian missions with Hollywood glamour. Yet, their departure did not bring peace. If anything, it marked the start of an even deeper rupture. In March 2021, the Oprah Winfrey interview became a cultural earthquake. The couple made explosive claims. That a senior royal had questioned the skin color of their unborn child, that Meghan had been denied help during mental health struggles, and that there had been a pervasive lack of support during their time in the royal household. The impact of that interview cannot be overstated. It triggered headlines across every continent, sparked furious debate in Parliament and across social media, and forced Buckingham Palace to issue a rare public statement. Recollections may vary. Behind that diplomatically vague sentence lay a growing rage and resolve among the royal inner circle. This was no longer about disagreement, it was personal. From that moment forward, every interaction between Prince Harry and the royal family became a media event soaked in subtext. At Prince Philip's funeral in April 2021, Harry returned alone to the UK. Cameras zoomed in on his interaction with Prince William and Prince Charles, trying to read body language like tea leaves. Though there were brief exchanges, insiders later described the mood as frosty. No reconciliation was achieved. In 2022, the Queen's Platinum Jubilee marked another flashpoint. The Sussexes attended, but were notably sidelined from the key balcony appearance. They were no longer part of the monarchy's working core. The message was clear. This was the royal family drawing a line in the sand. Then came Harry's memoir, Spare, released in early 2023. It was a raw, deeply personal account that peeled back the royal curtain with unprecedented candor. Harry wrote about feeling like the spare to William's heir, claimed his brother physically attacked him during a heated confrontation, and accused the institution of failing to protect his family from the media circus. He questioned his father's parenting, described family conversations in painful detail, and pulled no punches in his depiction of palace life. If the Oprah interview was a rupture, Spare was an obliteration of royal boundaries. It wasn't just that Harry had spoken out. It was how far he had gone. Private grievances became public history. Deep-seated wounds were laid bare. And for the monarchy, an institution built on mystique, control, and symbolism, it was an existential threat. Amid all this, Meghan's public image continued to polarize. While she earned praise from her supporters, critics accused her of exploiting royal ties for fame. Her podcast, Archetypes, offered a glimpse into her worldview but also reignited debate over her perceived victimhood. Meghan was no longer the royal bride. She was now a controversial media figure, and every move she made reverberated back to Buckingham Palace. By the time Queen Elizabeth passed away in September 2022, the fracture was beyond repair. Harry and Meghan attended the funeral events, but the distance was tangible. During the mourning period, Harry was reportedly not allowed to wear military uniform and was not informed promptly about the Queen's deteriorating condition. These gestures, subtle as they seemed, were not missed. They spoke volumes about where he stood within the royal framework. And now, in 2024 and into 2025, the slow withdrawal of privileges and recognition has reached a new stage. First came the removal of official patronages. Then, public statements that no longer use the term HRH when referencing Harry. Finally, the royal website quietly updated its profile on Prince Harry, stripping away His Royal Highness designation in a manner that was subtle yet unmistakably intentional. Each move has been carefully orchestrated. Not a single word, image, or omission appears without senior approval. The palace doesn't act hastily. Everything is choreographed. And in this case, the choreography seems to be building toward a grand finale. The formal removal of Prince Harry from the royal line of succession. This timeline is not just a series of events. It's a story of trust eroded, of love strained under pressure, of duty clashing with identity. Prince Harry once walked behind his mother's coffin as a grieving boy, shouldering the expectations of an ancient institution. Now he stands on the outside, facing erasure from the very future he was born into. And yet, for all the pain and spectacle, the question remains, is this truly what Harry wanted when he stepped away? Or is this the price he's being forced to pay for choosing to speak freely? As we move into the next section, we'll explore what's happening behind the walls of Buckingham Palace. The conversations, strategies, and legal frameworks being quietly assembled as the monarchy prepares for what could be its most decisive act in a generation, removing Prince Harry from the line of succession. Inside the towering gates of Buckingham Palace, where tradition is steeped into every hallway and the air carries the quiet weight of history, a silent war is unfolding. There are no open declarations, no fiery speeches, and certainly no tabloid photos to capture the real battles. This war is quiet, strategic, and deadly in its impact, not fought with swords or media statements, but with silence, protocol, and calculated institutional decisions. At the heart of this struggle stands King Charles III, determined to secure the monarchy's stability, and his son, Prince Harry, who has become the most disruptive royal presence in living memory. Though publicly invisible, the tension is thick behind palace doors. Officially, the palace insists on neutrality, on decorum. Yet actions speak louder than press releases. And every carefully timed omission, every sudden removal of a name or title, every whisper of sources close to the king, tells a deeper truth. This is a cold war within the family, a ruthless campaign of marginalization that now seems to have one final goal: removing Harry altogether from the monarchy's future. What's most striking about this conflict is how emotionally charged it is, and how emotion is masked beneath the surface. By royal standards, emotion is considered weakness. Royals don't rant or cry in public. They send messages through gestures and protocols. And in this case, the messages have grown increasingly severe. While Harry and Meghan made headlines by speaking openly on television and interviews, through memoirs, the palace has responded through silence. But not passive silence. Strategic silence. A silence that carries with it consequences far heavier than words. It didn't start with the HRH removal. That was just one move in a long, calculated campaign. The real war began long before the public realized. Insiders reveal that following the Oprah interview, senior courtiers and advisors began to discuss containment measures. The king's inner circle, composed of trusted aides, legal experts, and loyalists to the crown, developed what some now call a cordon of influence strategy: limit Harry and Meghan's impact, restrict their symbolic power, and gradually sever their association with the institution. According to former royal staffers who have since broken ranks, discussions intensified as Harry's book deal became known. The monarchy feared what might be revealed, particularly about Charles and Camilla, both of whom had spent decades repairing their public image. There was a growing sense that Harry was no longer just an estranged family member. He was now a loose cannon with global influence. The concern wasn't just what he would say, it was who would believe him. To address this, the palace began a covert campaign of erasure. It started with internal protocol revisions, changing how Harry and Meghan were referenced in official speeches, removing their names from certain ceremonial documents, reducing their involvement in charitable events previously under royal patronage. Behind the scenes, palace officials began speaking more openly, though always off record, about the consequences of Harry's decisions. Words like disloyal, damaging, and even dangerous began to surface, albeit delicately couched in phrases like strained relations or a need for stability. King Charles, known privately as thoughtful and deliberate, reportedly wrestled with this shift. Despite the public distance, those close to him say the decision to formally remove Harry from royal visibility has been painful. As a father, he still harbors affection for his son. But as a monarch, he understands the fragility of the institution. His duty to the crown, its image, continuity, and legacy, has now overridden his personal emotions. Palace sources describe Charles's transformation since becoming king as dramatic. No longer the heir waiting in the wings, he has adopted an assertive posture rarely seen in the past. He's made changes to staffing, consolidated control over palace communications, and put forth a clear vision for a slimmed-down monarchy. Within this vision, there is no room for ambiguity. Either one is in or one is out. And Prince Harry, with his transatlantic lifestyle and explosive revelations, does not fit the new mold. One of the more telling moments came during the coronation planning. Early on, there was debate over whether Harry would be given a prominent role. Some suggested he be allowed to walk with the family. Others advocated for a low-profile appearance. In the end, Harry was placed far from the inner circle, attending as a guest rather than a royal figure. He arrived alone and left immediately after the ceremony. It was not just a scheduling detail, it was a visual message. You are no longer part of the machinery. This quiet warfare has been supported by what royal insiders refer to as the firm, a term used to describe the collective institution that governs the monarchy's operations. Within the firm, senior courtiers, attorneys, and communication specialists have reportedly worked overtime to ensure that every move regarding Harry is legally sound, public relations proof, and aligned with broader goals. This isn't personal vengeance, it's institutional preservation. However, not everyone inside the palace agrees with the current course. There are factions, according to those who have worked within Clarence House and Kensington Palace. Some advisors, particularly those who served under Queen Elizabeth, have expressed concern that this hardline approach may backfire. They worry that the public could view it as too punitive, especially toward a man who remains, after all, the son of the reigning monarch and the brother of the future king. But those voices have grown quieter in recent months. Since Queen Elizabeth's passing, Charles's authority has become absolute in matters of royal conduct. He is no longer constrained by the image of a doting grandmother trying to keep the family together. He is now sovereign, and with that comes the burden of legacy. As one aide put it, the king believes that history will judge him not by how much love he shows, but by how effectively he preserves the monarchy. This strategic campaign has also included careful communication with Parliament. While the monarchy remains largely ceremonial in lawmaking, major changes to succession or royal privileges require consultation. Insiders say the palace has quietly floated legal inquiries to understand what would be required to alter the line of succession. Though no formal petition has been filed, the groundwork is being laid. The plan, sources claim, is not to make a sudden declaration. That would trigger unnecessary backlash. Instead, the palace aims to make Harry's removal feel inevitable, like the natural consequence of decisions already made. Bit by bit, the public has been conditioned. First the interviews, then the memoir, then the title removals, and now, perhaps, the final step, his quiet erasure from the order of succession. Even now, however, palace officials are extremely careful in their language. Publicly, no one admits that such a move is coming. But behind closed doors, discussions have become more specific. Legal drafts are being reviewed. Communications teams are preparing contingency statements. Advisors are reviewing historical precedents, such as the 1936 abdication of King Edward VIII, to ensure the monarchy is not blindsided by any public relations disaster. Meanwhile, Prince Harry continues to move forward in his own world. He's involved in media projects, legal battles, and public speaking engagements. To his credit, he rarely attacks his family directly anymore. But the damage has been done. The royal family, under Charles's leadership, has decided that neutrality is no longer enough. They must act, not out of spite, but to survive. This silent war, conducted in whispers and shadows, is nearing its final battle. The next step, if taken, will not be just a rejection. It will be a rewriting of royal history, a recalibration of bloodline and entitlement. It will be the formal, legal, and symbolic act of a king erasing his son from the crown's future. The world may not see the meetings, the papers, the debates happening now behind the palace walls. But history will see the outcome, and it will ask, how did a father become the man who chose the crown over his child? As we move into the next section, we will examine in full detail the HRH title removal on the royal website, how it was done, what it means, and how this single digital deletion has become the cornerstone of a broader campaign to sever Prince Harry from the line of kings. It happened quietly. There was no press release, no dramatic palace announcement, no official statement from Buckingham Palace. And yet, what took place on a single page of the royal family's official website was one of the most decisive public shifts in the monarchy's treatment of Prince Harry to date. With no fanfare and no warning, Prince Harry's title, His Royal Highness, was scrubbed from his official royal biography. For those watching closely, this was not just a website update. It was a calculated digital strike, one that marked another step towards severing him from royal legacy and potentially from the line of succession entirely. The timing of this deletion was no accident. The HRH honorific, while already technically not in use since 2020, had remained a gray area. When Harry and Meghan stepped down as working royals, it was agreed they would not actively use the style, Her Royal Highness, yet the titles were not formally revoked. The distinction seemed subtle but meaningful. They were not stripped of their styles, merely discouraged from using them in a working capacity. That allowed a sliver of ambiguity, a thread still connecting them to the institution they had left behind. But Buckingham Palace, under the reign of King Charles, is clearly no longer tolerating ambiguity. The removal of the HRH style from the website wasn't a haphazard correction. It was a symbolic excommunication made with precision. Royal websites are maintained by dedicated teams of communications officials who act under direct instruction. Every sentence, every line, every update goes through layers of internal clearance before being made public. This was not an oversight. It was a signal. Sources within royal circles say the decision to remove the title came after several months of internal deliberation. There had been concern about the perception that Harry and Meghan were still benefiting from royal prestige while pursuing commercial ventures and public criticism of the crown. By leaving the HRH style visible on the official site, the monarchy risked appearing complicit, providing passive legitimacy to a couple it no longer considered part of its active framework. Internally, it was seen as a matter of optics and consistency. King Charles has been committed to modernizing the monarchy, streamlining its members, and focusing public attention on those who contribute directly to the crown's duties. In that framework, maintaining references to titles that are no longer valid and function undermines the message of clarity. Quietly removing the HRH was, in effect, cleaning house. But the act carried a much deeper resonance. To the British monarchy, titles are more than honorifics. They are tools of power, symbols of place, and markers of hierarchy. Titles define who is in and who is out, who has access to influence and who does not. The HRH style has traditionally denoted direct descent from the monarch or close proximity to the throne. To remove it from a king's son, regardless of previous agreements, is to make a broader public declaration. This person no longer operates under the institution's protective mantle. From a technical standpoint, the change was made across multiple pages. On the royal family's site, Prince Harry's bio was rewritten to refer to him simply as the Duke of Sussex, with no use of His Royal Highness. Similarly, mentions of Meghan were amended to reflect the same treatment. These edits were discovered by journalists and royal watchers within hours, prompting a media storm. Headlines across the UK and beyond began interpreting the change as the latest escalation in the royal family's conflict with the Sussexes. Observers quickly pointed out the significance. This wasn't just about online profiles. This was about erasing royal identity in the public eye. A figure who once represented the monarchy around the globe, who undertook royal tours, who served in military ceremonies in full-dress uniform as HRH Prince Henry of Wales, was now presented as something entirely different. A duke, but no longer a prince in practice. The reaction from Harry and Meghan's camp was notably restrained. There was no public statement, no challenge, no visible protest. That silence spoke volumes. It suggested either resignation or strategic restraint, an acknowledgement that fighting this particular battle would do little to change the course of what's coming. Legal experts weighed in almost immediately. While the use of the HRH title is governed by royal prerogative, and its revocation does not require parliamentary approval, such moves are rarely made lightly. Royal precedents are delicate matters. Historically, stripping someone of their style is a grave decision, one associated with scandal, abdication, or treason. For it to happen in the context of a website update reveals the new reality of monarchy in the digital age. The most powerful declarations don't always come from palace courtyards. Sometimes they come from quiet edits on a government-managed web page. The symbolic power of this digital maneuver cannot be overstated. In the age of Google, Wikipedia, and real-time media coverage, a website becomes a modern artifact of identity. When the royal family removes a title from its digital records, it is not simply altering metadata. It is altering memory. The website, often referenced by media, teachers, scholars, and curious citizens, now offers an official version of the royal narrative, one in which Prince Harry's royal styling is erased. This move also dovetails with another internal palace effort, narrowing the royal brand. King Charles has made it clear that only a select few will carry forward the public-facing duties of the crown. Prince William and his family represent the future. Queen Camilla and the remaining senior royals carry the present. There is no room for a California-based duke who alternates between memoirs and documentaries while legally challenging British tabloids. The HRH removal is the visual capstone of that ideological shift. It also lays the groundwork for what could be next, a formal removal from the line of succession. The palace, according to insiders, is approaching this with the same strategy: quiet, deliberate, and legally cautious. The removal of HRH on the website was a test balloon, gauging public response and preparing the ground. If backlash had been overwhelming, the palace could have retreated. Instead, the public reaction was largely one of indifference or mild approval. That, to the royal strategists, was green light enough. Supporters of Harry argue that the HRH style had already been rendered moot. Critics insist that the official deletion was long overdue. But regardless of interpretation, one fact is undeniable: the monarchy chose to make the change now, in the middle of 2025, years after Megxit. Not in 2020 when the initial break happened. Not after the Oprah interview. Not even after the release of Spare. The decision to remove the title in this specific moment is intentional. So why now? Some insiders speculate that the king sees this as the final act in a gradual distancing campaign. The royal family can now point to this digital change as evidence that Harry no longer holds any operational royal status. When or if the line of succession is altered, they will cite this as precedent. The logic follows a clear path. If he no longer holds HRH status, if he no longer receives royal funds, if he no longer carries out duties, then why should he remain in the royal order of inheritance? To many observers, this is the monarchy hardening itself for the next 100 years. As the world grows more democratic, more digital, and more skeptical of inherited privilege, the British royal family knows it must adapt. And part of that adaptation, under King Charles's watchful eye, means removing elements that could damage the institution's image. Prince Harry, with his tell-all tendencies and emotional transparency, has been deemed incompatible with that image. But what does this mean for the monarchy's future relationship with the Sussex children, Archie and Lilibet? Already, their royal status is ambiguous. Technically, under King George V's 1917 letters patent, they are entitled to be called Prince and Princess. But usage of those titles is discretionary. If Harry is formally removed from succession, questions will inevitably arise about the children's place. The HRH removal thus serves as a precursor not just to one man's demotion, but potentially to a multi-generational rewrite of royal entitlement. What's clear is that the monarchy is asserting its authority not through explosive action, but through slow, deliberate erosion. This is not the age of royal exiles being sent to foreign castles. This is the era of digital deletions and public perception management. Yet the result is no less dramatic. With one update to a web page, the monarchy has announced a message centuries in the making. Titles may come by birth, but they can be taken away by will. As we move into the next section, we'll dive deeper into the legal and historical precedents that might empower King Charles to take the next step, removing Prince Harry from the line of succession entirely. Can a king really change the order of inheritance? And what are the risks, legal, political, and personal, of attempting to do so? For centuries, the British monarchy has maintained a delicate balance between heritage and law, symbolism and statute. At its core, it is a constitutional institution bound by a mixture of ancient tradition, written law, and evolving political realities. While the removal of Prince Harry's HRH title was largely symbolic and within the purview of palace discretion, the prospect of removing him from the line of succession plunges the crown into murkier waters. A potential constitutional bombshell with unprecedented implications. Succession to the British throne is not governed by family preference or royal whim alone. It is regulated by statute. The most foundational law in this regard is the Act of Settlement of 1701. Passed by the English Parliament, it established that only Protestant descendants of Princess Sophia of Hanover could inherit the throne and explicitly excluded Roman Catholics. This act, over 300 years old, still serves as one of the pillars of succession law, alongside the Royal Marriages Act of 1772, and more recently, the Succession to the Crown Act of 2013, which updated certain rules regarding gender and religion. What's significant here is that none of these laws include provisions for a monarch to unilaterally remove a person from the line of succession. Succession is determined by birthright and governed by parliamentary law, not royal decree. This makes the current conversation surrounding Prince Harry not just about a family dispute. It's about legal structure, national sovereignty, and the limitations of royal power in the modern age. According to legal scholars, if King Charles wishes to formally remove Harry from the succession line, it would require an act of parliament. The king cannot simply erase his son's claim through a royal proclamation or internal decision. That makes the stakes of this move exponentially higher. We are no longer discussing royal household decisions or website updates. We are talking about legislative change at the heart of the United Kingdom's constitutional framework. Historically, such changes are rare. The closest precedent in modern times dates back to 1936, when King Edward VIII abdicated the throne to marry American divorcee Wallis Simpson. His decision created a constitutional crisis, one that ultimately led to the passage of His Majesty's Declaration of Abdication Act 1936. Parliament had to formally acknowledge and ratify Edward's abdication, and his name was subsequently removed from the line of succession. Importantly, this act also affected his descendants, who were excluded from royal succession henceforth. That moment remains a unique instance. No monarch has since attempted to legislate an heir's removal. But the Edward VIII case demonstrates the underlying principle: only Parliament, with the support of the monarch, can legally alter the succession. It also establishes the gravity of such a move. Removing someone from the line is not a symbolic slap on the wrist. It's a profound reordering of royal legitimacy. So how would this process potentially unfold in Harry's case? First, there would need to be a formal consultation between the Crown and the British government. This would include constitutional advisors, the Prime Minister, and parliamentary leaders. If consensus were reached that removing Harry was in the interest of national stability or royal integrity, a bill would have to be introduced, most likely titled along the lines of the Succession Amendment Act. This bill would have to clearly state the intent to remove Prince Henry Charles Albert David, Duke of Sussex, from the statutory line of succession, including all implications for his descendants. It would require approval in the House of Commons and House of Lords, and then the formal royal assent by the king himself. Given the sensitivity of the issue, such a bill would ignite intense debate among lawmakers, the press, and the public. There would be constitutional questions, moral arguments, and political calculations. Opponents would argue that removing someone from succession for personal or reputational reasons opens a dangerous precedent, that it politicizes the crown and undermines the idea of monarchy as an inherited and impartial institution. Supporters would insist it is a necessary evolution, that a monarchy threatened by internal rebellion must have tools to defend itself. But the legal questions don't end there. The British monarch is also head of state for 14 other countries across the Commonwealth realms, including Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. These nations recognize the line of succession determined by the British Parliament, but any change would ideally be mirrored by each realm's legislature to maintain harmony. This means that removing Harry could potentially trigger legislative procedures in multiple parliaments worldwide. making it not only a domestic issue, but a diplomatic one. Behind the scenes, such a legislative effort would require months of negotiation. The palace, already cautious about public backlash, would need to carefully orchestrate the messaging. It would likely be framed not as punishment, but as alignment with new standards. A necessary step to preserve the dignity of the crown might be the narrative. Even then, public reaction would be unpredictable. The royal family, by tradition, avoids political entanglement. A succession amendment would plunge them into the heart of constitutional politics. It could spark criticism from Republicans, fuel public anger from Harry and Meghan's supporters, and rekindle discussions about the relevance of monarchy in modern democracy. Moreover, there's the issue of unintended consequences. Removing Harry from the line could raise uncomfortable questions about other royals with controversies in their pasts. If one prince can be removed for personal behavior, what about others? Could this set a precedent that succession is conditional? Such speculation would be dangerous for an institution built on the idea of inevitability and bloodline. It's also worth considering the psychological and emotional weight of such a move. For all the legal and political discourse, this remains a father removing his son from his royal inheritance. Even if Charles feels justified, the optics will be painful. Many will question whether this was truly necessary or whether it was vengeance disguised as constitutional reform. Some analysts believe the palace might pursue an alternative route, freezing Harry's position without formally removing him. This could mean quietly agreeing that Harry and his children will never receive titles, funding, or roles, and hoping that public and political momentum eventually makes their removal from succession irrelevant. But others argue that Charles wants closure. The slow, deliberate pace of Harry's marginalization suggests a longer-term plan, one that only ends when the line of succession is purged of what the palace sees as its greatest liability. The complexity of the issue also makes timing crucial. Acting while Charles is still king ensures that the reform happens under his reign, shaped by his narrative. If delayed until William ascends, the calculus changes. William may have different feelings toward his brother, different strategies, and different advisors. By acting now, Charles ensures that his vision for the monarchy, the streamlined, drama-free version, is cemented. And yet, the public is not without influence. If backlash to the HRH removal grows louder, if polls show declining support for further sanctions against Harry, Parliament may balk. Elected officials, sensitive to public opinion, might resist being dragged into a royal family dispute. That's why palace communications are being carefully calibrated. Leaks are intentional. Timing is strategic. Every small step, from website edits to subtle press briefings, is designed to test the waters. The risk, of course, is escalation. If Harry is formally removed from the line of succession, it is almost certain that he and Meghan will respond publicly. That response, whether through interviews, legal filings, or another memoir, could reignite a media war of global proportions. The monarchy might win the constitutional battle but lose the public relations war, a scenario it desperately wants to avoid. At its core, this debate strikes at a fundamental question. What is the monarchy for? Is it a family bound by tradition and inheritance? Or is it an institution that must evolve to protect its image and authority? In Prince Harry's case, these two definitions collide. His very existence as a royal symbol is now seen as both a threat and a legacy. To remove him would be to choose preservation over kinship, continuity over complexity. And in doing so, King Charles would not only shape his reign, but redefine what it means to be royal in the 21st century. As we move forward, the next section will explore exactly what that next fatal move might look like, how the palace is preparing this decisive step behind closed doors, what evidence exists of internal legal consultations, and why now may be the final window for the monarchy to act. To the casual observer, the royal family's actions over the past several months might appear disconnected, piecemeal decisions, isolated gestures, silent updates. But to those paying closer attention, a more ominous pattern emerges, a slow, deliberate, and irreversible distancing of Prince Harry from every vestige of royal standing. The removal of HRH from the official website was not the final move. It was the last soft warning. What comes next is widely seen as the monarchy's nuclear option, the formal removal of Prince Harry from the line of succession. And according to insiders close to royal legal advisors and palace operatives, the groundwork for that exact move is already in motion, quietly, strategically, and without public discussion. King Charles has long been a monarch of quiet discipline. Unlike his late mother, Queen Elizabeth II, who preferred to avoid controversy and maintain the monarchy's image of unity at all costs, Charles is more exacting. He has shown himself willing to act when the monarchy's integrity appears under threat. Since his ascension, he has swiftly redrawn the royal working map, cutting back on secondary royals, tightening control over public appearances, and elevating only those he deems essential to the crown's modern vision. But Prince Harry poses a different kind of problem. He's not a peripheral cousin or distant duke. He is the king's own son. His bloodline is undeniable. And yet, in the eyes of many within the palace, he is now the most destabilizing force in the royal system. To understand how King Charles is quietly preparing to strike Harry's name from the line of succession, one must understand the inner structure of royal legal apparatus. The king does not act alone. Behind every public decision lies a council of constitutional lawyers, private secretaries, and key figures from the Privy Council. According to palace insiders, multiple closed-door sessions have taken place since early 2024, specifically focusing on the legal avenues available for succession realignment. What is known as this? While King Charles cannot unilaterally remove Prince Harry from succession, he can initiate and recommend a formal parliamentary review of succession laws. And behind closed doors, the palace's legal team has reportedly been drafting scenarios and legal proposals that could be presented to the government discreetly. These documents are not public. They exist within internal advisory briefings, operating under the classification of constitutional contingency. Sources close to the Privy Council say this process has accelerated in recent months. The tipping point, many believe, came after Harry's public support of lawsuits against the Home Office and British tabloids, cases that, in the monarchy's view, brought too much royal identity into legal and political arenas. One senior legal consultant close to the palace reportedly remarked, "It's no longer about discipline. It's about containment. The monarchy has to be able to close the book on Harry before Harry reopens the entire royal archive to the world." It's a chilling perspective, but not surprising. Since the publication of Harry's memoir and his ongoing media appearances, the palace's confidence in ever reabsorbing him into the royal fold has disintegrated. What remains is a defensive strategy, one intended to protect the institution, even at the cost of cutting out blood relatives. But the palace knows it must proceed with caution. Stripping Harry from succession without due process would be seen as an overreach. It would contradict the monarchy's role as a constitutional, apolitical body. That's why Charles's team is reportedly working to frame this as a broader succession reform, one aimed not just at Harry, but at modernizing the monarchy altogether. This allows the palace to create legal and moral distance from the personal feud while still achieving the same goal. One of the key proposals reportedly under review includes a provision that would allow Parliament to remove members of the royal line who permanently reside outside the UK, engage in commercial activity using their titles, or actively litigate against the British government. On the surface, this sounds like a structural safeguard, something designed for institutional integrity. But in reality, it's a scalpel aimed precisely at Prince Harry. Even more telling is the recent tightening of royal communications and the appointment of new advisors with legal backgrounds to the king's immediate staff. These changes suggest a pivot in strategy from symbolic gestures to concrete legal maneuvers. According to palace watchers, the king has surrounded himself with individuals not just skilled in media or protocol, but in statutory law and constitutional precedent. That speaks volumes about his intentions. Furthermore, the timing is critical. King Charles is still early in his reign. His popularity remains relatively stable, buoyed by a national desire for continuity after the long reign of Queen Elizabeth. Any drastic move made now would come during a period of institutional goodwill. Waiting too long could complicate things. Public opinion might shift. Parliament could become less cooperative. And Harry himself might release new material. New interviews, new accusations that could make any move appear retaliatory rather than protective. All of this points to a narrowing window. The palace, ever calculating, understands that now is the time. That's why multiple sources confirm that internal messaging has begun. Key royal family members have allegedly been briefed in private, some as recently as April 2025, about the need to finalize succession clarity. While the specific language avoids direct mention of Harry, those familiar with the conversations say the intent was unmistakable. Within the palace, opinions differ. Prince William is said to be in support of the final move. seeing it as necessary for the long-term health of the monarchy he will one day inherit. Princess Anne, always a voice of duty and practicality, reportedly believes that while the decision is difficult, it reflects a reality that can no longer be ignored. On the other hand, Prince Edward and Queen Camilla are rumored to have expressed concern about the emotional toll, especially regarding Harry's children. Still, consensus appears to be forming. And when royal consensus builds behind closed doors, the public typically sees the result months later, with little warning. One question that looms is how this final move will be presented to the public. According to communications experts advising the Crown, the strategy is to avoid confrontation or drama. If Parliament agrees to pass a bill that would formally exclude Harry from the line of succession, it will likely be done under the guise of broader royal modernization, perhaps tied to future plans for restructuring royal finances, clarifying who may represent the Crown, and redefining royal obligations in a globalized world. The palace is also expected to lean heavily on the narrative of necessity. The idea that the monarchy must adapt or die is powerful and persuasive. By presenting Harry's removal as a consequence of circumstance rather than personal vengeance, King Charles hopes to preserve moral authority even in the face of inevitable backlash. Because backlash is certain, Harry, even in self-imposed exile, still commands a large international following. His supporters view him as a modern rebel, a man who broke free from a cold institution to protect his wife and family. They will see any legal move against him as cruel, vindictive, and unforgivable. But for the palace, the risk of inaction outweighs the risk of backlash. Allowing Harry to remain in the line of succession, no matter how symbolic, creates a lingering vulnerability. It keeps alive the possibility, however remote, of a fractured royal future. Removing him extinguishes that possibility once and for all. As we prepare to explore the implications of that act, we must understand that this isn't just the story of a family in conflict. It is the story of an institution fighting to define itself in the modern era. The British monarchy has survived civil war, abdication, assassination attempts, and global transformation. But its greatest threat in 2025 may come not from an enemy at the gate, but from the son of the king himself. The next section will examine how this final blow will affect not just Harry and Meghan, but their children, their legacy, and the broader structure of royal privilege. When a prince is erased, what becomes of his lineage? If the formal removal of Prince Harry from the line of succession is the monarchy's final blow in this long, unraveling saga, then its aftershock will be felt most acutely not just by Harry himself, but by his wife, Meghan Markle, and their two children, Archie Harrison and Lilibet Diana. This section of the story, often overshadowed by headlines focused on Harry's public battles or King Charles's silent strategy, is perhaps the most emotionally volatile and symbolically devastating. What happens to the Sussex children, and what does it mean for a mother who once married into royalty to watch her children erased from its future? To fully grasp the stakes, one must understand how titles, lineage, and inheritance work within the British royal framework. At present, Archie and Lilibet hold the titles of Prince and Princess, at least technically. According to the 1917 letters patent issued by King George V, the titles of Prince and Princess are automatically granted to the children of the sons of the monarch. When Queen Elizabeth II died and King Charles ascended the throne in 2022, both Archie and Lilibet became entitled to their royal styling by right. Yet entitlement and usage are not the same. For months after Charles became king, there was no official recognition or update to confirm these titles had been conferred in practice. It wasn't until March 2023 that Harry and Meghan publicly referred to Lilibet as Princess Lilibet Diana in a statement confirming her christening. That moment was seen by some as a quiet reclaiming of royal recognition, but it was also a gamble. The palace did not object publicly, nor did it issue a formal declaration supporting the titles. Instead, the silence fed speculation. Were Archie and Lilibet truly part of the royal lineage, or were they honorary figures with no real standing? Now, with the threat of Harry's removal from the line of succession looming, the ambiguity around the children's status grows darker. If Harry is legally and formally excluded from the succession, what becomes of the children born to him? Would their titles be revoked? Would they remain in the line, or would they too be quietly sidelined? The monarchy has yet to face a situation where the children of a deposed royal remain in title limbo. There is no legal blueprint. There are only precedents, and each one is a reminder that royal favor can shift with the winds of political need. From Meghan's perspective, the implications are severe. When she married Prince Harry, she entered a world of ceremony, protocol, and hierarchy. She endured its strict codes, faced its media firestorms, and later rejected its stifling structure. But through it all, the one tether that remained to the royal institution was her children. Regardless of where they lived, or what public choices she and Harry made, Archie and Lilibet carried names tied to the crown. If Harry is struck from the line of succession, that symbolic link becomes far more tenuous. For Meghan, who has long expressed concern over how her children are perceived and protected, this move would confirm what she has always suspected, that the monarchy never intended to fully embrace her or her family. In her interview with Oprah Winfrey in 2021, Meghan spoke candidly about conversations allegedly held within the palace over whether Archie would be given a title or security. That moment, filled with tears and unresolved questions, remains one of the most controversial turning points in the entire saga. It framed the institution not just as indifferent, but as selectively exclusionary. If King Charles proceeds with removing Harry from succession, the message is no longer covert. It becomes policy. It affirms that the Sussex lineage is being disinherited, not in the financial sense, but in the bloodline narrative of royal history. Meghan, as a mother, will likely see this as an act of generational rejection. An effort to ensure that her children's place in the monarchy is scrubbed before they can ever exercise it. Yet the question arises, will this actually impact Archie and Lilibet's daily lives? Practically speaking, they live in the United States, attend American schools, and are raised far from the pressures of royal appearances. They are not being groomed for ceremonial roles or public duties in the United Kingdom. By design, their lives are private and non-royal. From a legal standpoint, the British Parliament has no authority over their day-to-day experience in California. But symbols carry weight. Titles affect public perception, diplomatic treatment, and historical record. A prince or princess is viewed differently by schools, by media, by society. If those titles are quietly invalidated, or if they remain unacknowledged on royal records, that shapes their legacy. It influences how they are seen, not just now, but decades into the future. Moreover, the exclusion of Harry from succession may carry subtle legal ripples. If the monarchy moves to rewrite succession law, it's possible they may include language that clarifies inheritance and royal status for descendants of removed individuals. This means Archie and Lilibet could be barred not only from succession but also from receiving any future royal honors, patronages, or ceremonial recognition. They may be written out of the monarchy entirely, not as punishment for wrongdoing, but as a precautionary act of institutional self-preservation. The emotional toll of this on Harry and Meghan should not be underestimated. While Harry has often positioned himself as the rebellious outsider, he has also maintained a deep reverence for his late mother, Diana, and a complex loyalty to his family history. He has repeatedly stated that his actions are intended to protect his children and provide them with a better, freer life. But freedom, in this case, comes with a price. The price is separation from legacy, a slow but final disconnection from a world that once defined him. And for Meghan, the fallout is even more acute. She entered royal life with optimism, only to find herself battling press hostility, institutional coldness, and personal isolation. Her escape from royal duties was not a retreat. It was, by her account, survival. To now witness her children being caught in the royal crossfire, erased for choices she and Harry made, is likely to deepen her sense of injustice. It also reinforces the narrative that the royal family punishes those who step out of line, even if they're children. Yet not everyone agrees this outcome is tragic. Some believe that being removed from royal expectations will liberate Archie and Lilibet, allowing them to grow up without the burden of titles, protocol, or inherited scrutiny. Without official roles, they will have more freedom to choose their identities, careers, and affiliations. They won't be required to uphold an institution that never fully embraced them. They can forge new paths, ones that honor their heritage without being bound by it. But even in that potential freedom, the ghost of what might have been will linger. Royal children are often born into expectation, whether or not they choose to accept it later in life. To be born a prince or princess and then quietly cast aside sends a powerful message about who belongs in the story of the crown and who does not. From a broader institutional lens, the removal of Harry and the sidelining of his children signals a tightening of royal bloodlines. King Charles is redefining the monarchy as an elite core unit, focused on a streamlined future with no room for ambiguity. That includes Prince William, Princess Kate, and their 3 children. Everyone else is being moved out of focus, like chess pieces cleared from a board. And yet, even as the monarchy reorganizes itself, it cannot erase the human cost. Titles aside, Archie and Lilibet are still the grandchildren of the reigning monarch. They are the great-grandchildren of Queen Elizabeth II. Their bloodline is indisputable. What is in question is whether they will be allowed to claim any symbolic or ceremonial inheritance from that lineage, or whether the monarchy will close its gates forever. As we transition into the next section, we will explore how Prince William fits into this delicate equation. Has he advised King Charles to accelerate these decisions? What role does he play behind the scenes? Is the future king silently orchestrating the legacy of succession before his time has even begun?